First of all, John Frakes in the house, everyone. And when they get into Earth's orbit, what's up, Trek Nation, and welcome back to After the Snap. I am your host, Tasha Pierce, and I could not wait to sit down and talk to you guys today about Discovery, Season 3, Episode 3, The People of Earth. So if you want to know what I thought about this episode, just keep watching. First of all, John Frakes in the house, everyone. Our very own Jonathan Frakes was the director of this episode, and it was written by Bo Yin Kim and Erica Lippold. This episode is with Burnham and the crew of Discovery meeting back up, reuniting, and then heading straight to Earth to see if they can find out what the Federation has been doing since the burn. When they get into Earth's orbit, they are immediately accosted by Captain Ndoye's crew, and they find out there are no Starfleet bases left on Earth. So what is becoming a ritual? I started this episode out in tears. I've literally been sitting in a pool of my own tears since episode 1. And I'm glad that Frakes and the writers included this scene with Tilly talking about everything that they've left behind, actually coming to grips with the fact that she won't see her family, her friends, and she's hoping for some semblance of familiarity. And also, we're seeing Burnham for the first time in a year. And the changes are kind of obvious. They're rather glaring in Michael Burnham. Besides the obvious physical changes, she hints that the changes are also changes to her personality. I mean, she spent a year in basically survival mode, and I think out of everybody on Discovery, Georgiou hit the nail right on the head. And when she assessed what she saw different in Burnham, she hit the nail right on the head. Now, besides the obvious reunions, Burnham has to catch the crew of Discovery up to speed about exactly what's going on with Starfleet, the Federation, and the burn. And one of the blanks that was kind of filled in to me, or maybe I just didn't catch it in the first episode, is that the Federation had toyed around with other warp engines and none of them worked for them. And then after that, the burn happened. Now we finally got a roundabout number of how many casualties the burn had, and it turns out there were millions. Now, what was more interesting to me is who asked the question. Who asked how many people were lost? It was Detmer. So once again, we are seeing Detmer becoming visibly disturbed when she thinks about the sheer amount of loss that the Federation had suffered. But they're putting a lot of emphasis on her character, and I'm sure they're doing it for a reason. We're sure we're building up to something, but we are seeing her ask the tough questions. Saru, of course, got the captaincy. Now, I kind of hate that it was Burnham's to refuse, but the right officer did end up getting the job. I just hate that we still had to kind of pander to Michael. I understand Michael led them through the wormhole, and she has been a central character, the central character, over the past 2 seasons of Discovery. But this is one of those things that I didn't think we had to pander to her. The crew should have insisted that Saru remained as the captain. And we see Saru say that he wanted Burnham to be his first officer. But after pretty much surrendering the captaincy, what does Burnham do the next time Saru asks her to do something? The exact fucking opposite of what he asked her to do. That's what she does. She, in fact, drafts Book into basically circumventing his command. And I am so glad that Earth had changed. I'm so happy that finally somebody is making Earth kind of they're not completely the bad guy, but yeah, they were some assholes. And I was really glad that in this episode that we see Earth also go into survival mode, and there was no longer this welcoming utopia. Now, they say we're still a utopia, but we're locking our borders down tight. We don't want any outsiders in here because we don't know what the intentions of anybody is. So basically, this is showing us just how dire the situation is. Earth is closed. Now, when Ndoye, Captain Ndoye and her team, when they decided that they were going to beam over to inspect Discovery, and then we got this another gratuitous look of Book without a shirt, and I think again they're doing it to keep people like me happy, but I'm starting to see it as it's almost like the way you exploit a woman with her body. Let's not every week exploit Book for his body. He's got more to offer, I'm sure. But he did look damn good in that Starfleet uniform. Now I'm thinking of the personal log that Burnham was reciting into at the beginning of the episode. There was one thing that she said that jumped out at me, and she said you can love someone and still let them go. So she's learning these valuable lessons in this year of being basically on her own. But then we saw her later on say goodbye to Booker. I'm pretty sure we haven't seen the last of Cleveland Booker. And since they brought it up, he does have an awfully human sounding name for someone who has never been to Earth. But again, at the end of the episode, we see Booker going his way. We see Burnham basically letting him go. And the flirtation is real between these two characters. And I mean, throughout their entire interactions with one another in this episode, we saw an awful lot of what I would consider flirtatious moments between Booker and Burnham. Another thing I really liked was the meet the parents moment between Booker and Giorgio. I think it was well done, and that she asked all the right questions. She made all the right assumptions. She acted as a parent would in that situation. So even an evil parent is a parent. We ask the same question. I still think Giorgio's got something up her sleeve besides being the little devil that sits on Saru's shoulder and tries to talk him into doing things, her way. It's like she's trying to pull him to the dark side. Like, do it in her best Palpatine. Then we kind of move into this landing party who has boarded Discovery to do this inspection. And I am taking a little bit of exception with Stamets telling all Discovery's business to Adira before he even knows what her angle is. He don't know her. Why is he telling her all their business? But Adira's introduction to the crew was super sweet, super funny. The exchange between her and Tilly, super cute. And I know I'm saying super for everything because anytime you have Adira, cute, very cute. Now, we also learn that she is a human carrying a Trill symbiont. And that's kind of interesting because the last time we saw a human carrying a Trill symbiont, it was Will Riker. And Will Riker is Jonathan Frakes, and Jonathan Frakes is the director of this particular episode. So see how things just came full circle. But I'm wondering if it's supposed to be some type of a difficulty for her to carry this Trill symbiont, or have we gotten past the incompatibility between that symbiont and a human body, even though she's only had the symbiont for 2 years and she does not have access to the memories of all of the hosts. And maybe that is where we're creating the roadblock for her. But I thought that the roadblock should have been actually being able to carry the symbiont for that long of a time. But finding out that she's 16 years old, and I am still holding out hope that she is going to be the Federation historian and be the youngest person on the ship. That, to me, is as hubris as it gets. She has the most knowledge of all of the history of the Federation over the time that Discovery has been absent, and she is the youngest person on the ship. Now later, when the Discovery was into it with the Raiders, and we have Burnham basically burning Saru by taking the dilithium and pretending that she's going to sell it to the Raiders, we see once again Detmer kind of steal a scene. And she stole the scene because Saru asked her to place the ship between the torpedoes and Burnham's ship, basically because he told her to. And she questioned that. She argued that it took a Wusakan to tell her, hey, just do what, just do what he's saying. And she did it, and it did kind of knock the socks off of a lot of the crew, but nobody, it appears, was lost. And I think that was her big fear, that if she put this ship in harm's way, that someone else would get lost and she would feel responsible. So again, we're noticing a major shift in demeanor of Lieutenant Detmer. Now, let's talk about a part that I really didn't like in this episode, and that was United Earth Defense Force Captain Ndoye's beef with Wynn and his raiders. And I guess it was both alluring and disappointing. Yeah, it was a little bit of both for me, because the people of Earth are not at all friendly, despite the fact that there are different species all still living on Earth. In fact, there were different species in that very landing party or boarding party on Discovery. So we still have multiple species living on Earth, yet you are so suspicious of anybody else coming into Earth's orbit. You just immediately firing on people. But they didn't immediately fire on Discovery. They held them. They gave them an opportunity to say who they were, and they warned them away from Earth. Well, my question is, for all this time, did they not even attempt to hail Wynn's ship? And then with Wynn being on the ship, he never thought to explain that he was a human? Yeah, that whole moment was very Scooby-Dooby-Doo to me. It was like, and I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for you meddling kids. It was very predictable. You take the mask off, everything about it looked like a cartoon. And then another thing that this is not something I dislike. That scene encompassed what I did not like about the episode. But one thing that got me to thinking, Earth is no longer a part of the Federation of Planets, right? Which still means that there are 2 Starfleet vessels out there somewhere, and I still would like to know who is on those ships and what is their mission. Now we find ourselves towards the end of the episode in Saru's, now Captain Saru's, ready room, and it was he and Burnham, and they're discussing the fact that she didn't even want to be captain of the ship, which still, to me, shouldn't have even been an option. But okay, she didn't even want to be captain of the ship. That's A. And then B, we see Saru basically, without reading her the riot act, he read her the riot act. He basically told her he's going to have problems trusting her. So, but ain't no trust. You my first officer, and I don't know how that's going to work out. You're my first officer, but I don't trust you. Those 2 things don't go together. So we see where these 2 characters are taking different paths. And one path is Saru setting up Giorgio's telescope in the ready room. He is following in the footsteps of Giorgio. And then we see Burnham basically creating a new path for herself. Now, I don't know what this means for her character moving forward, but it is an interesting thought. Like, does this mean that she at some point will separate herself away from Discovery? Because you see, she and Book, they have made some lasting memories together, and the tension is there. Not just between Burnham and Book, but between who Burnham was and who she is becoming. Now, before leaving Earth, the human members of the crew got an opportunity to beam down to Starfleet Academy and take a look at some familiar locations. And they needed that. And they all saw a tree that you have to think that Boothby took care of that tree for so long. And that tree, 900 some odd years later, was still standing. They all had personal memories about studying or who they talked to, the path they took. This was good because there was no Burnham and there was no Saru. It was that bridge crew, and they were the focus. They were the center of that scene, and it was important that it be them, and it's important that we get scenes like that moving forward. Okay, and that's the episode. So that brings us to the question of lights. How many lights do I see? There are three lights. Three lights, because this episode had its minor flaws, but overall it was a solid entry, and I always love a Jonathan Frakes directed episode. Next week, the episode is Forget Me Not, and I'm still not 100% sure who's directing that one. So next week, we'll meet back here to talk about that episode, Forget Me Not. But today, why don't you tell me what you thought of the episode, The People of Earth? Leave that in the comments below. What did you think of Earth's demeanor? Does it remind you kind of the way we are right now in I'll say in the United States? I can't blame this on the whole world. It's just us. So please like and subscribe if you've not already done so you can be notified when I drop my 2 videos per week. And remember, as always, I want you to live long and prosper.